More Republicans than Democrats have died of COVID. New Texas law allows carrying handguns without a license. Report shows Islamophobia industry is a $1.5 billion market in the U.S. Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Khan declares March for fresh elections. At least 15 killed, 40 wounded in attack on popular Shia shrine in southern Iran. Nasheeds gaining popularity globally. From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight, a new study concludes that the COVID-19 pandemic has killed more Republicans than Democrats. The National Bureau of Economic Research has found that significantly more Republicans than Democrats have died from the virus since the initial vaccine rollout in 2021. The study examined data from Ohio and Florida. It found that death rates from COVID-19 were only slightly higher for Republicans than Democrats during the early days of the pandemic. But by the summer of 2021, a few months after vaccines were introduced, the Republican access death rate rose to nearly double that of Democrats. The New York Times reports that a new law in Texas joins what has been an expanding effort to remove nearly all restrictions on carrying handguns. Half of the states in the U.S. no longer require a license to carry a handgun. The state-by-state legislative push coincides with a federal judiciary that has increasingly ruled in favor of carrying guns and against state efforts to regulate them. Texas is the most populous state to do away with handgun permit requirements. 5 of the nation's 15 biggest cities are in Texas. That makes access to guns without a permit a new fact of life in urban areas, to an extent not seen in other states. A study conducted in Canada reveals the US-based networks that influence and fund Islamophobia worldwide. Jasmine Zine is a professor of sociology, religion, and culture at Wilfrid Laurier University in the Canadian city of Waterloo. Speaking to Anadolu Agency, she said the Islamophobia industry has a market of $1.5 billion in the US alone. She notes that the industry is coordinated by 39 US-based organizations who provide much of the funding for it. She also said Islamophobia networks are transnational. Citing her 127-page report, which took 4 years of research, Zine confirms that media outlets are one of the major actors in the Islamophobia industry. According to her research, there are nearly 300 far-right and white supremacist groups active in Islamophobic incidents. More than 9 million Americans have cast early ballots with 2 weeks to go before November midterm elections. That's according to data released Tuesday by the United States Elections Project. The vast majority of these votes were mail-in ballots. There's still a large number of untallied mail-in ballots, with more than 41 million requested so far. Unlike most other developed nations, the U.S. does not make Election Day a federal holiday. California and Florida have the highest numbers of early votes cast so far, with each tallying well over 1 million. Georgia, which is likely to be a key battleground state yet again, this election cycle is nearing the threshold with over 986,000 early ballots cast. Democrats continue to make up the bulk of voters casting early ballots, with about 50% of the total. Just 30% have been cast by Republicans. On Wednesday, a state judge ordered Mark Meadows to testify before a grand jury in Georgia, saying his testimony is material to the ongoing investigation. Meadows is former U.S. President Donald Trump's one-time chief of staff. Georgia is in the midst of an investigation into interference in the 2020 presidential election. President Joe Biden narrowly won in Georgia in 2020, besting Trump by less than 12,000 votes. Trump has claimed without evidence that the election was stolen from him, citing that he says he believes in widespread voter fraud. Meadows has been fighting against having to testify, and his lawyers have reportedly said they will launch an appeal. Senator Lindsey Graham, who has also been subpoenaed in Georgia, has taken his case to the Supreme Court and is waiting a verdict. In international news, Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced a march to the country's capital on Friday to demand the government call fresh general elections. Speaking at a news conference on Tuesday, Khan said that his protests will begin from the city of Lahore, with people joining in from across the country. In response, the country's government has started preparations to deploy thousands of security personnel to block Khan's supporters from entering Islamabad. According to officials, the Interior Ministry has already decided to deploy around 30,000 police, rangers, and paramilitary troops in the capital. The government announced that it would not allow protesters to enter the red zone area near the Parliament building. Earlier this month, Khan won 6 of the 7 National Assembly seats in a by-election he said was a referendum on his popularity. News about an attack on a popular Shia shrine in southern Iran comes after the break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. 15 people were killed and 40 wounded when armed assailants opened fire at a popular Shia shrine in Iran's southern city of Shiraz on Wednesday. According to local reports, 2 attackers were immediately apprehended by local security guards. A search is underway for the 3rd attacker, who apparently managed to flee from the scene. ISIS, or Daesh, has claimed responsibility for the attack, which came amid widespread protests across Iran over the death of a young Iranian woman in police custody last month. Wednesday marked 40 days since Mahsa Amini's death. That led to renewed protests in several cities, including Tehran, amid heavy deployment of police on the streets. There was also reports of clashes between police and protesters in her native town of Sanandaj in western Iran during a ceremony to mark the 40th day since her death. On Wednesday, a Rohingya activist was gunned down inside a refugee camp on the southeast coast of Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. Mohammed Joshim was shot dead by unidentified killers at Balukhali camp of Ukiya district, Sheikh Muhammad Ali, a local police officer, told Anadolu agency. The killer fired several rounds of bullets at Joshim, leaving him critically injured. He died on his way to the hospital. According to the official data, over 120 refugees have been killed in camps over the last 5 years. Bangladesh has been hosting more than 1.2 million refugees, mainly in Cox's Bazar's refugee camp, since August 2017. That's when they fled a brutal military genocide in Burma's Rakhine state. Aid is slowly coming to southern Nigeria after the biggest flood since 2012. Killed more than 600 people and affected nearly 3 million others, according to official figures. Many have fled their homes, some forced into overcrowded displacement camps. Others, completely cut off from the world, remain in communities swallowed up by the waters. Efforts now focus on passing the damaged and partially impassable highway linking Bayelsa State and Rivers State, among the 2 most devastated regions. Supplying food is almost impossible as it is hampered by strong currents of water that are strewn with obstacles or choked with vegetation. Aid coordination is also hindered by lack of mobile coverage in remote areas. The United States said it has donated $1 million in humanitarian aid to the country. European oil giants Shell and Total reported massive profits Thursday as sky-high energy prices fuel a devastating cost of living crisis across the continent. Shell, one of the biggest oil companies in the world, posted $9.5 billion in global third-quarter profits. It was more than double $4.2 billion it reported during the same period last year. The United Kingdom-based corporation also announced plans to reward shareholders by buying back $4 billion worth of its stock and boosting its dividend by 15%. French-based Total Energies, meanwhile, reported $9.9 billion in profits, up from $4.77 billion compared to the third quarter of 2021. The International Energy Agency projected for the first time on Thursday that global demand for every kind of fossil fuel will peak or plateau in the near future. It said that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is accelerating the worldwide transition to renewable energy. The agency projected that oil demand will level off in mid-2030s before ebbing slightly by mid-century. A song by the British-Pakistani Nasheeds artist Omar Issa claimed the third spot last year on the music store iTunes UK chart. 4 years ago, Issa made global headlines by reaching the #1 spot on iTunes worldwide chart with his album My Muslim Family. In an interview with Asian Image, UK's leading Asian news website, Issa said, "My friend introduced me to Nasheeds, which are vocal-only Islamic songs. His catchphrase is, anything music can do, so can the voice. My voice is my instrument. Nasheed is an Arabic word for chants. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dawood Warnsby. About 30 years ago, I walked into a mosque for the first time here in Canada, and I felt pretty strange. The reason I felt so weird? Well, in those days, it wasn't easy to walk into a mosque and find someone else who was a shaggy-haired singer-songwriter who wrote poetry and worked professionally as a puppeteer. I had no idea how I was going to fit in culturally or creatively with this new community. I quickly realized that there was a long and rich history of arts in the Muslim community that went hand in hand with education and learning. A little while later, I came upon a magazine from an organization called Sound Vision. And they had a little blurb at the back of the magazine that said, if you're creative, we'd love to work with you. I took some songs that I'd been writing, put them on a little cassette and called them A Whisper of Peace, sent them through to Sound Vision. I had no idea that over 25 years later, I would still be working with Sound Vision. Things have really changed over the last quarter century. Now we see tons of creative commercial Muslim artists making music and videos and film and television and comedy and cartoons. It's wonderful. But sadly, we're also still seeing a lack of educational materials for young children. Sound Vision continues to be one of the only non-profit media producers creating quality educational content for Muslim children and families. Children need mentors and teachers who are able and willing to help inspire them with wisdom, self-esteem, and care for their world. The Adam's World series has been rebooted as an app with new episodes and new songs. We have the popular Adam's World Club and the Colors of Islam classes for children and youth to attend online. And now there's a new program in the works called Falafel Dude, helping school children learn to be better citizens, better neighbors, and better Muslims. Join me in supporting Sound Vision's ongoing work however you can, so that we can continue to inspire Muslim children and families for generations to come. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at our in-depth analysis segment.
So August 5th, as I said, was the removal of Kashmir's autonomy, and it was done unilaterally. It was done even by, according to India's own constitution, it's an illegal move that has been done on the people. And it needs to be protested because after everything is said and done, this did give Kashmiri people territorial autonomy. And territorial autonomy meant that settler colonialism could not be as rampant as it has been after 2019. So that's something that's very important here. Otherwise, when we look at the autonomy, when we look at Article 370, which went away, which was basically not removed, it was de-operationalized because it cannot be removed according to India's own constitution, unless and until the same constituent assembly that made it and formulated it is not constituted again. And that has been dissolved long back. So it still exists in the Indian constitution. It has just been de-operationalized. So what was most important in that autonomy was the territorial sovereignty of Kashmir, which was the Article 35A. And that's very important for the international community to understand that Kashmiris adhered to that. Otherwise, most of the autonomy that India had quote unquote promised Kashmiri people was gone in the 60s. It was completely eroded and it was only nominal in nature. So that's something that we have to understand. And the reason I'm kind of reiterating this is that when we think about autonomy, a lot of people have these questions where they want to ask, like, why is it that Kashmiris are adhering to an autonomy within Indian constitution when they don't want to be with India? So the easy and quick answer to that is that most of the autonomy was about territorial sovereignty. So that was that Kashmiris had the right to, they had the right to franchise, they had the right to property, and they were the indigenous native people who had, their own citizenship. So Kashmiris technically enjoyed a dual citizenship. One is the permanent residency of their own territory, and then they had documents like passport and everything that kind of helped them move around the globe, which was mediated by the Indian passport for them, for many of them, and for most of them, so to speak. So, so that's something that we need to consider, that what went away in 2019 was the territorial sovereignty. Otherwise, most of the autonomy was gone by 2019. It was just nominal. What we also have to think about, what else is happening in Kashmir? It's mind-boggling that we cannot keep a track of how many laws and how many statutes that Kashmir had are changing every day. And India makes it completely a legal thing for people that this has to be done because it's connected to development. And that's one thing that India sold to the international community in 2019, saying that we have to develop the region and autonomy has been the biggest hurdle to development. And in that, they also pushed in gender discrimination, that autonomy discriminates against gender. So that's something that we need to consider. What kind of laws are changing in Kashmir? The first one is the Dominion law. Now, Kashmiris don't have any kind of permanent residency. They don't have the internal citizenship that they used to have, which also gave them protected basically their indigenous rights. They're not there anymore. And similarly, many other populations, indigenous populations, populations that are pastoral populations, there are new statutes that are being put in motion every day to make sure that people are kind of like, threatened into proving this, their Kashmiri citizenship, so to speak, or their indigeneity. So Kashmiri indigeneity is really at threat here and that also falls into the larger rubric of Hindutva, the RSS agenda of kind of like, one of the threats that was very, one of the threats that Kashmir kind of presented as to India was that it's a majority Muslim state. And that is under threat in this moment. So there's what you see, a connection, the Muslim connection with the rest of Indian Muslims. But we do have to remember that Kashmiris are working against the Indian constitution, whereas Indian Muslims have a problem within the Indian constitution. So that's a demarcation we want to be clear about. But at the same time, RSS's agenda of being genocidal and xenophobic against Muslims is also one of the aspects of what they're doing in Kashmir. So the other thing quickly that I want to talk about before I wrap up is I think in this moment, we know a lot about 2019. We know a lot about what's happened in the last 70 years. But what's happening in this moment is also very important for us to understand that settler colonialism is really, Indian settler colonialism is really on the move. It's on steroids. That's not to say that from 1947 onwards and even before, settler colonialism in different iterations and different molds and fashions was not prevalent. It was. But not in the manner it is now, because now India has carte blanche, and the international community is also in some ways quiet, even though Kashmir has been re-internationalized. So what we see is settlements that are being formed, laws that are being changed, things that Kashmiris can and cannot do inside, and many of that we see in press freedoms that are completely being confiscated. We see, as I said earlier, habitations and populations and hamlets being confiscated. People who are connected to resistance in any shape, manner, or form, even in thought, so to speak, are being jailed, arrested, are being criminalized. Properties are being attached. Laws that penalize Kashmiri resistance leaders, they are being changed and they're being made more vague so that everyone, literally all Kashmiris, can be incarcerated one day. So something like that. And this has also, in this moment, there is this conversation around silence in Kashmir. And I think that needs to be understood. It's not silence in Kashmir as much as it is silencing. It's complete and utter repression of Kashmiris. There is a war on Kashmiri mindset. And that's what I wanted to reiterate today as the main message of what I'm trying to say. Kashmiri mindset is a resistant mindset. And it has given India the maximum resistance it can do in the last 74 years. But now, with this brazen settler colonialism and this direct rule by the Indian occupation from Delhi, and having their own nominated person changing rules and creating executive orders, administrative statutes that are being, passed around in different departments, and laws are being changed without any kind of legislature, without any kind of asking Kashmiri people for their will. So in that moment, what we see is India is doing everything that it needs to do to make sure that it's launching a full-on war on Kashmiri mindset, trying to tell them that their relationship with India is inevitable and there is no way out. And I think that's something that we all need to consider in this moment. We have in the last 3-4 years talked a lot about how this autonomy went away and what exactly has happened. I think there are mechanisms, and in the international arena, we kind of like have to have this conversation as to why are Kashmiris being silenced and what can be an antidote to that. And one of the ways that we can really offer solidarity is, of course, like talking more about Kashmir to people who see Kashmir as a terrorism issue, because India has been very successful. In an anti-Islam, Islamophobic world, it's very easy when you talk about people who are majority Muslims and then armed/unarmed struggles, it's very easy for people to think that this might be quote unquote what is stereotypically seen and erroneously seen as Islamic terrorism. So I think that's where we as an international community need to talk to people about that this is a genuine movement and it does have Islamic elements, and we have nothing to apologize for. It has its own Islamic elements, Islamic aspects, Muslim aspects, and that's nothing to apologize for.
I will talk about the will of the people in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. They are resisting, and they will continue to resist until they get their basic rights, because it's the war, it's the struggle for their basic rights, which is promised by the international community, by the United Nations. But we have to think about the strategies. I think for last 70 years, I will not say failed, but we were not successful to create a narrative which we can sell to the international community. So it's high time for us that we have to think about the diplomatic way, how we have to deal. And then on the other hand, the political line, 3 on 4 fronts, we have to fight simultaneously to get our rights. Without the support of international community and without the one voice and united front from the Kashmiris, it will be very, very difficult for us. So it means that first we have to be united. Second, we have to change our strategies, how we have to lobby around the world what is happening in Kashmir. And then we have to have on the on diplomatic front one, and the legal front another line, because we have the specialists, we have the legal teams. So we have to confront India on different fronts at the same time.
Kashmiris are resisting the Indian state. because the Indian state does not have the moral position or the political legitimacy to confer on them any right or deprive them of it. So it's not just the denial of the rights, it's this very relationship of dependence that we have with the Indian state. We don't want anything to do with the Indian state. So we don't just contest their power to take from us, we also contest their power to give. We don't just contest the power that they have over us to kill us, but we also contest their power to let us live. Because it is with this latter power that the power to kill comes. So this is something that we have to keep in mind. And one of my friends, I won't be able to name him because he's living in Kashmir, he said something very profound. He said, Kashmiris are not fighting for Azadi because there are human rights violations. There are human rights violations because Kashmiris are fighting for Azadi, which means that if Kashmiris were to give up on this essential, profound demand that has shaped our lives now, moral lives, spiritual lives, political lives, personal lives, broken families, torn apart houses, scattered families, then India would have no reason to persecute us, though that could be contested as well, that the Indian state would not stop until it completely erases the last Muslim from Kashmiri land. But if Kashmiris were to give up, if they were to surrender, if they were to accept being part of India, things might have been different. And we know that many prisoners in Tihar jail, in other prisons, were offered exactly this, that you just have to accept the territorial sovereignty of the Indian state over Kashmir and you can go home. But none of them accepted this. So they're still in prison.
Thank you so much. That's all from our Washington, D.C. studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.